Sahana bhavatu, sahanau bhunaktu, saha viryam karavavahai, tejasvinavaditam astu ma vidvishavai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great energy. May our studies be illumined. May we not unnecessarily cavil with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So as usual, I'll mute the microphone to see if you have any questions and then see if we can answer something. So my question to you is, why are there no questions? Of course, on Monday evening, I gave an answer to another group. They had this one question, and I replicate my answer. So the question that they had really was about silence. And they gave three examples. One example was, supposing you write to somebody and they don't reply, that's a kind of silence. It's a silence on their part. And on your part, you have to decide whether just to leave it and keep quiet or whether to break your silence. Second example was there was a circumstance where the questioner kept quiet and was criticized. No, you should have intervened. You should have spoken up. And then the third example was, and this was a French group coming out of the La Chapelle at our center there in France. Always coming across a pair of shoes in the center things, what to do about that. Noting that the Swami, who is the president there, has a tendency to step over the shoes. And should we be saying something about them? These were the three examples that were given. And then, of course, there's a deep silence that I pointed out. I started my reply by saying, our Vedanta philosophy was seen by seers. We call these rishis. They saw the truth through introspective processes. Through the power of concentration, things were revealed. But they were also known as munis. And muni means people who practice mauna, that is, silent ones, silent people. Why should they be silent? Because our biggest difficulty is the absence of silence. Our biggest difficulty is noise. We are surrounded by noise everywhere we go. And we then heave a sigh of relief when we go to a natural place, let us say by a stream or a mountain or an ocean, where the sound of silence is tangible. I'm told that the quietest place on the planet is the Sahara Desert. You go there, there's absolutely no sound whatsoever. The only sound will be your breathing. So this is a great relief, but we welcome the absence of silence deliberately, because our modern lifestyle is such that we feel we have to apply the merits of modern technology, and even in the car we have to play something or we have to say something. And when people are in a room, we don't like a silence. Silence seems a very uncomfortable thing to do, and somebody has to think desperately of something to say. I always remember a politician in Zimbabwe, going back pre-Zimbabwe, he was a great frustration to journalists because they asked him a question and he would say, very thoughtfully, he'd say, yes. That's all he would say. And the journalist now was stuck. What to say? What follow-up question would he have to ask to get some more information from him? These one-word answers. But you see, why should we not be sparing in our words? And speech really should be used in a sweet way. The Bhagavad Gita, 17th chapter, tells us about a certain discipline, tapasya. What is tapas? Tapasya means strengthening the will, being able to direct the will, making sure that our will is strong enough to carry through without any contradiction, bearing in mind that thought is infallible. You put a thought out, it travels faster than the speed of light. And so traveling faster than a photon, it will manifest itself, will condense as a scene or a body, an environment. Don't forget, the body itself is an environment. Don't forget, the mind itself is an environment. And of course, we are well familiar with the environment of the familiar world, but dream also has its environment. And the peace of deep sleep also has its environment. If we want this environment to be useful to us, to be positive, to be elevating to the mind and lead us to nobler heights, then we have to learn the art of staying sportingly attuned to the glory of the self, or what religion calls God. That constant tuning in has to be there. And so when we are tuned in like that, then we can make an informed decision about whether we should be quiet or whether we should say something. But if we say something, and the something is trivial pursuit, it is just trivia. It is a waste of thought. It is a waste of speech. It is a waste of the capacity to speak. Then perhaps we should judge to keep quiet. And then when we decide to speak, we have to see, does it elevate the whole scene, including myself? Does it push the mind up to glorious noble heights? Does it tune ourselves into our blissful base? And is it spread in a useful, positive way elsewhere? Will it make a person smile? Will it lift a person's spirits? Will it be a joyful conversation? And if it's not, then not only will we drag our own minds down, but we'll also make an impression on the unconscious area, because every single thing that we say, everything that we think and do, all has its corresponding deposit in the unconscious area, in the unconscious mind. And there it sits for replay. And if we don't have control over it, it will replay randomly at any given moment and start gabbling away, talking away in a very random style, like an interjecting child, not having any manners, just raising something up, expressing something. Because if we truly follow the order of our thought, we'll find only randomness there. What we might call white noise will be there. So the art of tuning our attention into the glory of self has to be lovingly, sportingly undertaken. That is called spiritual practice. And that it comes with it an inherent silence, because the core of our own reality will be a withdrawn, quiet place of stability, some area of poise from which we can beam forward truth and goodness and purity and love. And a person who has realized, as we would say, a person who has established some equilibrium in the mind will have a beaming attitude everywhere. Wherever that person will go, they will shed and share their light. I used to often remark, you see an ashram, yes, it can be a place, no doubt. But really, wherever a certain holy person goes, that will be the ashram. I remember discussing with one visiting Swami who came here recently. And we were able to exchange stories about some very, very significant, wonderful monastic souls. And one of them, my philosophy teacher, as it turns out to be, was the pioneer of a center in Vishakhapatnam in India, in Andhra Pradesh. And his successor was appalled. He said, "What kind of Swami is this? We don't have a kitchen." "Oh no, Maharaj, the previous Swami, he never found the need for a kitchen. He used to take Ramakrishna, he used to visit village after village after village, and they gave him food. He had no use for a kitchen." "Oh, and what about a shrine room?" "Yes, he used to take Ramakrishna with him also, so that Ramakrishna could visit the villages, because they couldn't come to the ashram." A man like that. So very often, you see, we are responding to people's needs in a quiet, silent way, and using our own and beaming joy everywhere. That's the point. Taking the joy to others. Such a person will have, wherever that person is, the ashram will be there. Wherever that person is, the light will be there, the life will be there, and the love will be there. The light, life, and love in combination will be radiating from such a person, from the very skin, the very face of that person. Why not? We have the opportunity to do it. Why not? Why should we be selfish? Why should we rattle on our own agenda? Why should we not be listeners? Now, in order to listen, we have to be silent. There's no other way. And I don't mean just silent from the speech, from the lips, but there has to be silence in the mind. A good listener will have to have two qualities. First quality will have to be empathy. When people communicate, they're communicating what they feel. And in order to do that, we have to emotionally stand in their shoes. We have to, if necessary, ask them sufficient questions so that we understand what are they feeling. And that kind of empathy is very rare. We have this expression, walking in somebody else's moccasins. Moccasin, very thin shoes, probably made in China, no doubt. Very thin shoes, and with every step you'll feel every single stone and rock underfoot. So this will be walking in somebody else's moccasins. Second quality we require is observation. Much of the things that are spoken are unspoken. In other words, they're available in body language. They're available in tone of voice. This is one of the great disadvantages of the modern age of technology, where COVID has forced us to communicate with each other virtually through Zoom, etc. I'm sitting here in the ashram and there's nobody else here. Of course, you may say it's the time of the year, it's cold, there's snow, there's ice, and so on, But do you really get the full impact of communication if you're just dealing with everything remotely? And the answer is no. There cannot be this one-on-one connection. We realize this when we give workshops. Those people who attend workshops through valid reasons of their own online, either they're out of the country or they just have to look after other members of the family or whatever it is. In any event, they will tell. You see, when they come to a workshop, which is, live workshop, they can understand the great difference, because there's more than just talks going on. There is an interactive communication going on where one person is required to speak and one person is required to listen. And if we have these two things, empathy and the capacity to observe, then we will avoid the traps in listening. Right, so what are these? We can keep silent with the mouth, but what is happening in the mind? The mind can be having its own internal correspondence. And what we need to learn is to avoid some pitfalls. Some of the pitfalls are like this: interrupting somebody while they're speaking. is an indication that we're not really listening with empathy and with the capacity to observe, observing a person in such a way that we really have a penetrating vision and see, oh Lord, you're standing there dressed up in the disguise of a person. What a glory. And here, adoration to you and thanks to you. And so that power of observation has to be there. And at the same time, retain our attention, the empathy side, to what the person is feeling, what they're trying to convey to us from the emotional level. Not just relaying facts. Today, we can get facts at our fingertips from Google. Google is God in terms of information transfer. We can get it anywhere. Many, many years ago, not so long ago actually, come to think of it, the only way to get information was to go to a library and do intensive search, and it would take a long time to find what you wanted. Today, with technology, you just do a small Google search with the fingers, and there it is, all the information you ever want. Communication and information transfer is so rapid today. What a great advance there has been. So it's not just information transfer when we talk to another person. We're engaging a kind of interconnectedness with the person. And the more intimately we can make it through empathy, the more we can understand a person, the better the flow of communication. So we have to avoid interrupting the person, either through speech or mentally. If you are formulating an answer or response or your own conversation that you're going to lead with, you won't be fully listening to the other person. And if you interrupt with etc., or anticipate what the person says, I often joke, you see, having a conversation with somebody, you say, well, you see, the other day I went to the airport. No, it was the supermarket. And there I met your cousin. No, an old friend from school days. And we talked about the weather. No, we talked about his family life. You see how people can interrupt and anticipating what another person says. This is not listening. This is purely egoism. It is not having empathy, nor is it having the capacity to observe properly until our final observation point will come to the internal blissful base that we find in front of us. The same internal blissful base which is in you is in him or her and everyone else. All right. Now, in these three examples given about silence, we have to evaluate what is the internal condition. You write to somebody, they don't reply. What is your reaction? Are you internally annoyed about it? Are you internally insulted? Will you write them a letter with a small innuendo? I'm writing to this, I expected a message from you. Anyway, I hope you're well and so on. You see, even inserting that much will reflect the fact that you were uncomfortable. Your mind was disturbed. And so the first thing in considering the first case of silence will be, in what condition is my own mind? And the deepest silence is found within, in the stillness, the still sweet voice of the inner Lord, the still small internal voice of silence. That is the most profound voice. And we can withdraw at any given moment into that quiet place and sit. Very often people come here for various difficulties, some counseling, what have you. And I ask them to go to the door and come and sit on the chair and ask them what happened. Oh, I was at the door, I walked, I sat on the chair. All right. Now, with sitting on the chair, close the eyes and imagine somebody looking like you with exactly your same name is walking from the door. See the pace at which they're walking, see how they're carrying themselves, and see them sitting on the chair. Open your eyes, how do you feel? Oh, all my tension is gone, they would say. Why? Because you detached from a psychophysical unit that was giving you a problem. And as an impartial witness, you managed to withdraw into an area which had an element of poise. some potentially creative energy area being there, some witness, thinker, knower being there. You sat there on God's throne and beamed from where God beams, just for that moment. And you may forget it after that, but for that brief moment, you detached and you were able to sit, as it were, in a calm and poised area. And in that area, for that moment in time, you sat on the Lord's golden throne. Because we are made in the image and likeness of that being, we can sit where he sits, and then we can see the world as he sees it, not as we see it. God made the world and saw that it was good. We have no right to see it as bad. So then in the second case, well, you see where you should say something. We have to use our judgment. And in this regard, I gave the story, the Ramakrishna story, about the visiting holy man going through a village, and you're familiar with the story. He comes across the villages and they say, please don't go along this road. There's a dangerous snake there and he will bite you. And nobody goes along that road. That snake is tyrannizing the whole area and is known for its toxic bite. And the holy man does not fear, has no worry, no fear, because if you have faith, you have no fear. You cannot have fear and faith simultaneously. Such a person with full faith, seeing God everywhere, has nothing to fear, seeing no separation anywhere, said, don't worry, I'll tame the snake and give him a mantra and see if he can elevate his mind away from biting. And sure enough, as he's going along the path, the snake rears its head, ready to strike. Wait. Why are you doing this? What gain do you have from tyrannizing people? Isn't it much more noble to have a peace of mind, not to have so much anger that you have to strike everything? Because surely it's out of anger that you're doing this. And then he gave the snake meditation instructions, and he gave him some spiritual practice to conduct and a holy mantra to repeat. And the snake thanking him, and the holy man goes on his way, and a month later revisits to try to find out where his disciple is. And he cannot find him anywhere. And he asks the village people, have you seen this snake? Yes, we used to see him, but then he became very mild-mannered. He wasn't biting anymore, so village children used to tease him and maybe even take his tail, dash him against the rocks. So we don't know what happened to him. And he investigates, the holy man does, and he sees under rock a thin barbed wire-like creature. It was his former disciple, or his current disciple, the snake. What happened to you? Oh, my whole life changed. I became non-violent. I gave up eating rats and frogs, and now you see I'm a vegetarian. Actually, I'm a vegan also. I don't even eat eggs. And that's made me very mild-mannered. But why you have cuts all over the place? Oh, you see, I changed my ways. I no longer bit anybody, and the village boys must have taken advantage. They took me by the tail. They dashed me against this rock. That's why you see all these cuts. But it's not their fault, bless them. Oh, foolish snake, says the holy man. Foolish snake. My instruction to you was, please do not bite. But I said absolutely nothing about hissing. And sometimes we have to make our assertions known in certain well-judged circumstances, provided there's no venom in it. And a great example would be the great sage Vishwamitra. Vishwamitra was known for his anger and was known for his lofty attitude in terms of creating fear in people. After all, in the ancient days and today also, I have to say, any person who is a sage, if you now come across him and bring him to the point of giving you a curse, the curse will have to carry out because that person is dedicated to truth. And whatever comes out of his mouth will come true. And so even though Vishwamitra was a great Brahmanyani, who is a great sage of the highest order, Brahma Rishi, he was able to feign anger in order to get what he wants. And we see this in the Ramayana, story of Rama. We see this coming out. And so you see, sometimes we have to do that, provided we don't hurt anybody, and providing we assert ourselves, absolutely, because we don't wish to be the doormat. And I had to explain, what this term meant. So it wasn't a sleeping mat, a mat that was asleep. No, it was a mat that everybody wipes their feet on, and we say yes, 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 and allow people to take advantage of us. No, that's not good. We can hiss, we can assert ourselves, but no venom should be there. We should not bite. Then in the third circumstance, well, probably the Swami who stepped over the shoes hardly even noticed him. After all, if you're sitting in that shrine and you come out from the shrine, surely you're carrying the silence, because there's deep silence within the shrine. And that leads you to a deep silence within the shrine of your own heart. And within that, you'll hear the sweet, silent voice of the divine speaking to you. When you come out of the shrine, will you not carry it with you? But if you happen to notice shoes in the way, well, why would you say anything? You can simply take them and put them to the side, and as often as they're there, you can do it. After all, every action done in the right spirit, in the right way, will be a form of karma yoga, that is, doing an action simply for the joy of doing it, and doing it as a devotional activity. The Lord's shoes stood there so that I could notice it and put them nicely in a place. What's the harm? Why shouldn't I do that? Why should I say anything at all? Why should I make any corrective action? So this was a subject that we spoke about on Monday evening, and it was to do with the subject of silence. But of course, the most profound silence would be the silence where the mind is not a jumping mind, where the mind is nice and calm, and where we're able to see through the normal turbulence of the mind, and able to see that still, quiet area, if you will, which is the inner poise which we all have, where for that moment in time, and when we practice it, it becomes more and more enriched. We sit on the Lord's throne and beam from where he beams. So that is the area of the deepest possible silence. What is prayer? Prayer is getting to a point of listening to the sweet voice of the divine. That's all. St. John Vianney used to, I think it was either him or somebody he knew, somebody sitting in a church for hours and hours and hours together, and out of curiosity asking, what are you doing there for hours at a time? I'm intrigued, if you don't mind telling me. And the person says, well, nothing. I just look at him and he just looks at me. Allowing myself to be loved and to be looked upon with love, and in return for me to replace or radiate that love back. If we practice this, then all the noise, all the white noise will go. Now, it was Penzias and Wilson that seemed to discover at 2.7, a calculated 2.7 Kelvin, a kind of what was interpreted as a cosmic microwave background that was assumed because of a certain cosmological model. And it was like a white noise, and it was said that when you turn a television set on, the noise that you hear, that's the echo of the Big Bang 13.8 billion years ago. Well, you see, there are a number of difficulties with this, because when you try and pick it up without the potential interference from a ground-based detector, Penzias and Wilson got a Nobel Prize for detecting this, but they had a horn which was there, and they were only a few kilometers from the sea, and it is well known that moisture condensing on a horn will actually interfere. It will result in an interference of some kind that wasn't taken into consideration, never mind. You would expect, if it was valid, that it can be detected in outer space. And so about 900, let's say 900 kilometers or so, or from the Earth's surface, some satellites were there. COBE satellite was there, and WMAP was there, and only one detected a black body radiation, a peak, a monopole, which inferred a black body radiation. This was never repeated or found again. And in the latest satellite images, Planck images, these different frequencies, maps at different frequencies were combined, but the galactic noise, so prominent, which if you want to detect some kind of small peak somewhere, is just overwhelmed with the noise, the background noise of the galaxy itself. And so what to do about this? We can Photoshop it out. And in doing that, we get the results that we want. So you see, this noise, it is like this background noise all the time, the mind continuously talking to itself. And we're always listening to ourselves talking. When we really want silence, we have to wag our finger a little bit at this mental apparatus, which we call the mind, and say, "Oh, my mind, let us stop talking just for a moment, please. Let us just rest." Not a rest which is a dullness that induces a sleep, but a rest that enables us to discover our own inner nature, because all the interference is gone. All the anxiety is gone. All the talking that comes from the unconscious mind is all quieted now, just for a moment. And if we can do it for a minute or 2 minutes, then we can surely do it for 2 hours. And if we can do it for 2 hours, we can do it for 2 days. And if we can do it for 2 days, we can do it for 2 months. So there's great value in this silence. And so that would have been my answer to the question that arose on Monday. If there's another question, I'll take it. I see you learned the lesson well, the value of silence.
Hello, Swami. Could you speak a little about the occult powers? Because I wonder what it is. And I read in a book that Ramakrishna had a vision, and it was very harsh, because it was a prostitute and she was very dirty. So I wonder what is occult powers. I thought many people have occult powers.
It's a great misfortune if people have occult powers. It's a great obstacle because, you see, our potential can be virtually unlimited. We can do many things. Patanjali Yoga Sutras, that studies the subject in a very scientific, systematic way, gives us 4 sections or 4 chapters. And the 3rd chapter is exactly on the subject. It is to do with siddhis or powers. And all powers come through concentration and meditation. Don't think that concentration and meditation is entirely useful to you. It requires a key component. It requires wisdom. Supposing you have the power to walk on water, then and you develop this and you spend many years developing it. And how you develop occult powers, by the way, will be to have these 3-4 processes of dharana, dhyana, and samadhi in terms of various objects. So, for example, This threefold process is called samyama. When a person can direct his mind to any particular object and fix it there, and then keep it there for a long time, separating the object from the internal part, this is called samyama, according to Patanjali. And it's comprised of these things. First of all, concentration, sustained concentration would be dhyana, meditation, and then that would be seeing or realizing the inner structure of whatever you've done. And therefore, knowledge is power. When we know something, we have power over it completely. And so an example would be, you see, by the conquest of that comes the light of knowledge, that object. And then, of course, we have the powers. Swami Vivekananda writes a commentary like this on it. He says, when one has succeeded in making this samyama, all power comes under his control. This is the greatest instrument of the yogi. The objects of knowledge are infinite, and they are divided into the gross, the grosser, the grossest, and the fine, and the finer and finest, and so on. And so the samyama should be first applied to the gross things, the coarse things, the things that we experience. And then when you begin to get knowledge of this slowly by stages, it should be brought to finer things. But what's the use of it? So Ramakrishna gives a number of good examples. I'll give two of them. So there was two brothers, and one who became a yogi and sat under a tree and meditated thoroughly. And the other led a normal life, got married, had children, and so on. And after some while they met. Oh, brother, you've become a yogi. So tell me, what did you do all these years, and what merit did you get? And the yogi says, oh, watch. See this elephant walking by? Watch. Oh, elephant, die. The elephant immediately collapsed on the floor, and the breath is gone. Elephant, live, and he got up. Did you see that, brother? And the householder said, well, I saw an elephant live, I saw an elephant die. I can see that anytime I want, but what else? What else do you have? What did you spend all your energy on, all your powers of concentration, just for this? And then the other example, same thing, two brothers. What gain did you make? Oh, watch, see this river. Oh, meditate, meditate, meditate. And then he walks on the water and crosses it. And the brother says, okay. He pays some money and a boatman takes him across. You spent all these years doing that. For the same thing, I just paid a few rupees and went across. This is in India, of course. So you see, at the end of the day, what was the merit? Ravana had great, great powers, but also he had lust, he had greed, and he had a desire to hold on to his power and assert it. If we don't have wisdom and purity and holiness, we will misuse these powers. And Ramakrishna eschewed them, he spat them out, and Buddha spat them out also. Now, of course, we find all these miracles from Jesus, but Jesus had obviously the inner wisdom of the divine light of the incarnation. And he used these. There's record of him walking on the water. There's record of him curing, you see, useful things. A blind man can see, a lame man can walk, and miracle of miracles, a dead man can awake. Simply by Jesus saying, awake, arise, awake. Simply by him saying, oh, he's not dead, he but sleepeth. That was his point of view, and the man awoke. He goes to a fisherman, come follow me. The fisherman drops his net immediately. He doesn't know who the person is. Such magnetic power the person has, and he follows Jesus. Trying to get into Peter's house and surrounded by a crowd. Who touched my cloak? Peter says, why do you ask? We're impressed. We need to get in. You're going to my mother-in-law's. Oh, no, somebody touched my cloak. And then it's discovered that a woman who touched the tassel of his cloak was healed from a hemorrhage. And Jesus's understanding was, I felt some power being withdrawn from me. I felt there's some kind of withdrawal of magnetism. He being a magnetic personality, attracting all the good things toward himself because of his inner wiring and how he understood the world as completely full and free and perfect. So these powers, these occult powers, they may come through meditation and so on, but you see, of what value or use are they? And they should be spat out like toxic poison until and unless you're pure enough. Otherwise, you'll make money and form a circus. And people will come and say, oh, how marvelous. And your ego will be puffed out and you will descend into a regressed state in spiritual life. No doubt, powers will come as you progress spiritually, and you will certainly recognize them and acknowledge them. You'll be able to see all kinds of things as you go inward progressively. But the prerequisite for all of that will be purity of mind. That's where we start. We don't start off with meditation. We start off with purity of mind, purity of behavior, the moral code of Buddhism. Right action, right occupation, right thought, right meditation, right speech, all of these kinds of things. All these moral behaviors will have to be cleaning the mind. And pure cleaning means also clarifying. And clarifying means we see more of the truth progressively, bit by bit. That's worth having. And as you go and these powers become natural to the mind, to you, then you won't see any difficulty about them. They won't be very unusual. They will be normal, everyday things. You know? There used to be one devotee who said, oh, you wouldn't believe. I was thinking of somebody and suddenly they rang. And I shrug my shoulder and say, yeah, so what? There's only one mind, cosmic mind. What else would you expect? What we call supernatural is really natural. And the whole of Swami Vivekananda's commentary on the Raja Yoga and the Yoga Sutras is all about removing superstition and understanding that when your attention is shifted into that area of the mind called the superconscious mind, sometimes it happens by accident, he says. Sometimes people stumble into it or stumble across it. But you see, the yogi won't do that. The yogi will systematically develop it for a higher good. And awakening his own mind and his own layers of ignorance being removed one by one, bit by bit, progressively, then we come across the capacity to use what we have with a spirit of service, a spirit of generosity, with love, with healing, and all of these other things. So all these siddhis, 8 of them are described in Patanjali Yoga Sutras, many of them, and it's much better to leave them alone, please. Don't try to be esoteric. Just be a good person. You'll end up much better off. Yes. I also want to address something, just broadly speaking. I read your letter, and I translated from the French, and I managed to underline some things. See, when we consider all these things, we have to consider them in the light of reason, and we have to consider these things in the light of philosophy rather than theology. Theologically, we will all disagree. I'm a member of the Dublin City Interfaith Forum. In fact, our whole area Vedanta Society is a member, and I'm that representative. We have 7 faiths, and we all love each other dearly, like brothers and sisters. And we all go to each other's place of worship, and we all try to understand each other's position. But one thing we avoid at all costs is theology. I always remember, and I always quote the very dear and very, very famous and very profound Swami Ranganathananda, who became a president of the Ramakrishna Order. And when I was a brahmachari, he said to me, he said, you see, I feel sorry for you Christians. Why is that, Maharaj? Because, you see, your God can only have one son. Ours can have as many sons as he likes. And he did it with a twinkle in his eye and a sense of humor. If we are to debate theology, even debate, you see the positions, or even discuss theology, then we'll be treading on each other's toes if we take it seriously. But what is Swami Vivekananda's point of view? Doctrines, dogmas, books, temples, churches, rituals are but secondary details. And we always have to remember this. Underneath it is a unity of truth. And when we reach for that, then we have something valuable and valid. To the Christians, Christ is unique. We can understand it because the historical depth will not be there. Is only 2,000 years of experience. 2,000 years old. And it took Christianity 350, 360 years to sort out the nature of Christ and agree on it. But there were many, many different understandings of it and disagreements on it. So these kinds of things we also have to bear in mind. And it is the same thing with these Siddhis powers. They will be a curse to us because they will increase our egoism. They will be a curse to us if we try to cultivate these powers or stumble across them without the proper training. Without the proper training. And the proper training is contained in self-control. We can summarize it briefly as cultivating discernment, cultivating detachment, and above all, having a thirst for truth, a thirst for freedom. And this thirst for freedom drives us toward undertaking steps to purify our personality so that it becomes a shining example only of love spread everywhere. So Marina has a question. Text. When accepting all religions, why are there some symbols that can create in us certain weird feeling similar to fear? Weird feelings, of course, are all subjective. You see, when you do, say, dream interpretation, if you're in Africa and you're an African and you dream of an owl, this will be a very bad omen. Very, very bad omen. But if you're in another part of the world and you dream of an owl, it could mean some kind of inner wisdom, and it will be extremely fortuitous. So we have to take our own formula, our own experiences that are expressed culturally, expressed in terms of our concepts, and not worry about them too much. Take what is useful to you, accept what is useful, and leave what is not. We don't have to adopt every single symbol. What is the value of a symbol? These are created very often out of the depths of prayer and meditation and become meaningful to the person. Let us take, for example, the cross. The cross is a very ancient symbol and predates Christianity. And when we take the Celtic cross in Ireland, we see there are 4 spokes and a circle. This goes back to the ancient pre-Christian times, and when the Christians came, they extended the spokes to beyond the circle to make a cross. This is now why you have a Celtic cross. But what is the meaning? The inner circle was always to do with the sun. And now when you extend it, it becomes that sun which is born, literally the sun, Logos, but that's that being that shines. That example of a resurrected Christ, for example, a victory over a cross. So the Celtic symbol, which was already there, now becomes extended into a Christian context. Let us take, for example, the swastika. The swastu meaning auspicious, taken in a certain configuration, tilted on its side, making it face in a certain direction, was obviously the symbol of the Nazis. But when we look at it and understand the meaning within, for example, the Vedic tradition or Hindu tradition, we will see it also represents the sun. Now, when we compare that to the Celtic cross, before it became a cross, we will see the same symbol actually. And there's a great use and value in taking symbols and images and using them to lead the mind toward a state of meditative poise. So take what symbol appeals to you, what you like, and those which you are conditioned for any reason to avoid them. You don't have to take every symbol. The Muslims get around it. They don't have any symbols. So while they have, of course, Arabic writing taken from the Quran that they do, and they have the declaration, there is only but one God, Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet, and that will be there found on mosques and so on. And you might say that the calligraphy might be a symbol. You could take it like that. The Buddhists will have the symbol of the wheel of Dharma, where you see it's difficult to know whether the spokes are going from the hub to the rim or from the rim to the hub. And it's another replication of the Sri Yantra, which is a series of interlocking triangles, which has the same idea. Is it going from the center, the bindu, the point there, to the outside, or from the outside to the center? Whichever way, you can spend many, many hours being inspired by the cosmology that is inspired from it. And so it goes on. Make your own symbol, of course. That will be the way. What does it mean to crucify the truth? I don't know. I suppose what it means is that if you have truth, then you can distort the truth, I suppose, and destroy it. I don't know. I have never come across this phrase before. So I have to say, I can't help you in this way. Somebody who uses it, if they can explain it, then that will enlighten us all in terms of this. If you want to know what it means from a profound mystical point of view, Christ on a cross, that really means in order to get the glory of immortality, we have to surrender the I, the physical, the psychophysical identity. And as soon as we surrender that and crucify that, we get a glorious resurrection. Well, so if there are no other questions, we can leave it there for this evening. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Thanks.
Thank you, Swami.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh.